Today we have details on President Biden's latest spending bills and analysis on the economic impact. Digital currency Ethereum hits new record high. We look at its role in the crypto space. And Royal Dutch Shell's first quarter earnings are out and it's doing better than expected. That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. Sales are sizzling at Mcdonald's. Global sales are up 7.5% in the first quarter. It's better than 2019 before the company got slammed by the health crisis. Profits are up nearly 40%. Consumers apparently flocking to McDonald's as more Americans start eating out again. The crispy chicken sandwiches that rolled out earlier this year are also proving popular. McDonald's also saw strong sales growth in international markets like the UK, Australia, and Canada. The company sees growth continuing as well for 2021. It's raised its sales forecast to the mid-teens from the low double digits. And Apple posting sales and profits far ahead of Wall Street expectations as customers continue to upgrade to 5G iPhones. Facebook also smashing analyst estimates for both quarterly revenue and profit.
Shares of Apple and Facebook surged in extended trading on Wednesday after the two tech giants both posted earnings and revenue that once again exceeded already high Wall Street expectations. Apple said sales in China nearly doubled and results topped analyst targets in every category, led by $6.5 billion more in iPhone sales than predicted, and Mac computer sales that continue to beat estimates. The most valuable company in the world at over $2 trillion also announced a $90 billion share buyback. Apple has thrived through the global health crisis as consumers stuck at home stocked up on new devices, upgraded to 5G iPhones, and signed up for paid apps and services for fitness and music. Facebook has also benefited from people being stuck at home, which has led to a surge in online traffic, leading to higher ad spending by businesses. The world's largest social media company said it expected next quarter's revenue to be stable or grow moderately, but warned that the third and fourth quarter growth rates could, quote, significantly decline, citing a new pop-up privacy notification from Apple that Facebook said could hurt its business.
And Amazon says it's preparing a pay raise for more than 500,000 workers, increasing hourly pay by between 50 cents and $3. It'll cost the company more than $1 billion to do it. Amazon is currently working to hire tens of thousands of workers across its customer, delivery, package sorting, and fulfillment operations, so it's decided to move up its annual fall pay preview for those teams. It plans to roll out the pay increases in mid-May. Amazon already grew its workforce to more than 1.3 million people globally last year after hiring 500,000 new workers. That was to meet the increase in demand during the pandemic. But Uber, Lyft, DoorDash shares all falling today. It's after President Biden's top labor officials said most gig workers should be classified as employees. That could mean higher costs for companies that rely on contractors. The Labor Secretary has been expected to advance Biden's plan to expand worker protections and boost unions. He told Reuters he wants gig workers to get the same similar benefits as employees. But many gig workers actually prefer the flexibility of being their own boss. The International Labour Organization reported in 2017 that gig workers made up 34% of the workforce. It was expected to rise to 43% by 2020. And first quarter earnings for Royal Dutch Shell are out. The company did slightly better than expected. NTD's Arian Pastor has the story.
Royal Dutch Shell outperforms analyst estimates, reporting adjusted first quarter earnings of $3.2 billion. That's up 700% from the previous quarter.
Our strong adjusted earnings were driven by an outstanding performance from chemicals, resilient earnings from integrated gas and oil products, and robust results from upstream. These earnings reflect an improved environment.
The oil giant plans to accelerate towards net zero emissions, acquiring virtual power plant operator Next Kraftwerke.
A virtual power plant takes the power generated by thousands of homes and businesses and uses a sophisticated control and trading system to supply that power to the customers who need it.
This way, buildings with more than enough power give energy to buildings that need it. Shell also raised dividends by around 4% after slashing dividends April last year. That was Shell's first dividend cut since World War II. The company plans on growing it at a similar level every year, subject to board approval. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And stocks overcame a midday stumble and ended broadly higher on Wall Street, pushing the S&P 500 to another record high. The Dow rose 240 points, 0.71%, while the S&P 500 gained 28 points, 0.68%. The Nasdaq climbed 32 points, or 22%. Auto companies, though, fell sharply after Ford warned that a worsening global computer chip shortage could cut its production in half during the current quarter. In extended trade, Amazon jumped 3% after reporting quarterly sales that beat analyst expectations. And also after the bell, Twitter tumbled 9% following its quarterly report. The company's warning about rising costs and slower growth. And President Biden is promoting his new $1.8 trillion spending plan focusing on families, education, and childcare. Together with his infrastructure and jobs plan, the proposals carry a price tag of around $4 trillion. In his speech last night, Biden proposed a tax overhaul for the plan, which would raise the tax rates for the wealthiest Americans, including raising the top marginal tax rate for the wealthiest Americans from 39.6% from 37%. He also plans to nearly double the capital gains tax for Americans who earn more than $1 million.
I will not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000. But it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share. It's to close that loop.
The New American Families Plan includes $1 trillion for education and childcare, including free universal preschool and free community college for 2 years. It also includes $800 billion in tax credits for middle and low-income families. Republicans say most of that spending is aimed at satisfying Biden's liberal base and that it amounts to socialism. Biden doesn't only have to convince Republicans wary of spending, he also has to appease Democrats who want more aggressive policies. He said to discuss his plans with top Democratic and Republican lawmakers at the White House on May 12th. Mark Hamrick is a senior economic analyst at Bankrate and keeps his finger on the pulse in D.C. Asked him how Biden's plan to raise the capital gains tax would impact America's attractiveness for investors.
We've had higher taxes across the board, including for capital gains in the past, and the U.S. economy performed quite well. We're in a situation right now where not only do we have higher debt and deficits, but we also have some long festering needs in the United States that include infrastructure spending and some of the other priorities that the president has identified. And in many ways, these seem as if some of the potentially least problematic proposals, even though they may not be popular among members of the Republican Party.
How do we find this balance between the needs that you described and the additional debt burden? Is there a science to this? How do we find it?
Well, there's no science. In a perfect world, you pay for everything that you're spending as you go. But going back to the Congress during President Trump's administration, and now continuing now, where you have both houses of Congress effectively controlled by the Democrats, with the vice president being able to cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate, there is only a small cadre of elected officials truly concerned about debt and deficits. And let's remember that Republicans were leading the charge when they passed the Trump tax cut. That was $1.7 trillion. And there was not any concern then about what happened to debt and deficits on their part, at least on the part of those who approved that. So I think that as we now get trillions of dollars past the spending that we're targeting the short-term needs of the economy, the hole that was being dug out of, I think that people are perhaps more apt to think about the long-term fiscal implications of these proposals, but whether that actually has an implication for what they do with their votes is another issue entirely.
And from an economics perspective, should we be concerned? You mentioned, and you're correct, we don't hear so much opposition to the debts and deficits at the moment, but should there be?
Well, there obviously should be some concern, but there's also a concern about the long-term growth prospects of the U.S. economy, an aging population. We had Census Bureau figures released this past week, and they indicated that growth of the U.S. population is waning. This is another bit of harm that's been done by the lack of embrace of immigration in our country in recent times. Immigration has been a rich source of labor and less having to do with financial concerns and more about the strength of the United States over its history. So I think going forward, these are all going to be balancing acts, and how they'll be decided is obviously up to elected officials in Washington.
We see commodity prices rising very fast. We have manufacturers, consumer goods, etc., saying they're going to have to put the prices of their goods up because of higher costs, inputs. With $4 trillion package, we're going to add to these inflationary pressures, do you feel?
If all those things were passed, yeah, I think there would be a lot of competition for workers and of commodities and building materials. But the main consideration right now is that after shutting down the economy, broadly speaking, in a way that had never been done before, we're now reopening the economy in the larger sense in a way that's never been done before. And so, for example, if you take lumber, which is needed for building of homes and many other things, and for home renovations, which have been very popular here in the United States over the past number of months, lumber mills were shut down and because of the pandemic. And so there's this strange convergence of events, which will ultimately, I think, work themselves out as you get production to match demand. Because if you're a business, the worst thing you can do is not have sufficient output to match the demand that you're seeing. And so I think these problems can be ironed out. This is why our own Federal Reserve is essentially saying there's nothing to see here in the sense of long-term inflation concerns. For the sake of everyone, we hope they're right.
Very good. Mark Hamrick, Bankrate, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
The Commerce Department says U.S. GDP, which is the broadest measure of economic growth, grew 6.4% in the first quarter. That's the second strongest pace of economic growth in more than 17 years. Consumer spending, which accounts for around 2/3 of the economy, surged over 10% in the first quarter. It's the second biggest jump since the 1950s. Stimulus probably helped. Behind the strong overall GDP growth, the Commerce Department noted declines in inventories and exports. Inventories, which are a form of investment, dropped sharply, shaving 2.6 percentage points off the top line GDP growth number. A second report today showed the labor market continues to heal, but still has a long way to go. New applications for jobless benefits dropping to 553,000. That's a new crisis-era low, but still more than double the number consistent with a healthy labor market. And in the digital world, the second most popular cryptocurrency, Ethereum, just hit an all-time high. NTD's Phil Zoe has the details.
The second most popular crypto, Ethereum, hits an all-time record price of $2,800.
It becomes popular because it is popular, right? And that's sort of the nature of these types of assets.
Even JP Morgan said, Ether should outperform Bitcoin over the long run. America's biggest bank said Bitcoin is like a commodity, a store of value like gold that you can invest in. Ethereum, on the other hand, is the backbone of the crypto economy and serves as an exchange medium.
Bitcoin is the new digital gold. Ethereum, another product, is really the silver. It's always going to be number two.
Mr. Wonderful of Shark Tank fame said on CNBC's Make It, no matter how high Ethereum goes, it won't ever catch up to Bitcoin.
Bitcoin will always be the gold. Ethereum will always be the silver. There's something about being first that really keeps you ahead in a horse race like this.
But one expert says it doesn't matter which crypto coin you're talking about. They're all based on belief, backed by nothing.
You've got a situation that's drawn entirely by belief that this asset is going to be worth more in the future than it's worth today. It's what's called the greater fool theory of investing. You try to sell it on to somebody who will pay more for it than you've paid for it.
He warns new and novice investors to be careful because you're up against big players on Wall Street.
So you're really competing against high-powered computer algorithms that can outmuscle you. And so that's tremendously, tremendously dangerous for individual investors when they're playing Wall Street's game.
Royal says you're better off sticking to traditional investments that gives you long-term returns. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Ethereum slid a little since hitting its all-time high this afternoon, currently trading closer to $2,700. Bitcoin sitting around $53,000. And the Federal Reserve Chair says he isn't worried that China has a head start in the race for a government-issued digital currency. He says it's more important to do it right than to do it fast, and that China's approach wouldn't work in the US anyway.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says China's digital yuan cannot replace the dollar as the world's main reserve currency.
And that's because of our rule of law, our democratic institutions, which are the best in the world, our economy, our industrious people, all the things that make the United States the United States.
Powell said Wednesday he's not concerned about countries like China that move fast in launching a digital currency. What he's really concerned about is getting it right. He also noted that China's digital currency wouldn't work in the United States.
The currency that's being used in China is not one that would work here. It's one that really allows the government to see every payment it's used for which it is used in real time.
Powell said he thinks the digital yuan has more to do with what's happening within China's own financial system and less to do with global competition.
The Boston branch of the Federal Reserve is researching digital currencies with MIT, so they are at least preparing for a digital dollar, even if Powell says Congress has the final say. Eric Townsend is a former hedge fund manager and the author of Beyond Blockchain, The Death of the Dollar and the Rise of Digital Currency. He wrote it 3 years ago, well before all the hype around crypto. So I asked him just how significant this race between the US and China really is.
This is probably the most significant, important trend to hit society since the personal computer and the public internet. It's that big of a deal, and it's going to affect and change the lives of every single human being on the planet. It's a really big deal. But it's a big deal that's going to play out over the next 20 plus years. And the event that's the big deal is what I'm calling the digital currency revolution. It's the realization that we need to find a better kind of money that works better, does more things, is more functional, more versatile, more capable than the money that we've had in the past. And interestingly enough, it was actually the Bitcoin guys who solved the technological challenge that had to be overcome to make this all possible. What's happening now, and as I predicted in my book 3 years ago, finally, 10 years later, governments are finally waking up and saying, wait a minute, this changes everything. And whoever is in charge of this, whoever is in charge of designing the new money system that defines the money we all use throughout the whole world, is going to have an incredible amount of power.
A lot of people will say, well, we already have digital dollars here. Everything we use is digital dollars. What is the revolution? Where's the revolution?
You know, this is a really, really important distinction. And the difference is what we've had for 30 plus years are digital accounting systems to keep track of conventional currency. There's nothing digital about US dollars. It's a conventional currency system. What is digital is all of the accounting systems that keep track of those US dollars. When we talk about digital currency, we're talking about actually transmitting value through a computer network. So when I send you a wire transfer, I'm not sending any money through the internet. What's going through the internet, or actually through a private network that supports wire transfers, is a message from one bank to another saying, look, I'm sending you this secure message because we want to do a transfer between these two parties. We're going to clear that through all of our existing systems and IBM mainframes that were, running programs written 30 or 40 years ago is going to sort this all out. When we talk about digital currency, it's actually, I send you $100. It's money going through the internet. It's not a check or a promise or a draft. It's actually sending the money through the network.
So you're saying basically this is revolutionary because if the government and if the traditional banking system weren't to act on this, they could be replaced, right? You're saying that you don't need these middlemen anymore. Am I getting this?
Pretty close. I would say it a little differently. What is going to happen is the entire finance industry will be forced to recognize, wait a minute, the game has changed. They don't need us anymore to be intermediaries, to be custodians of money, because that concept that money has to be held in a vault and somebody has to be the custodian of it, we can come up with a better technology-driven solution that eliminates that need, and it's just much better. What it does mean, though, is it doesn't mean that it's obviating the need for the finance industry. What's been invented here is really the secure digital bearer asset. Now, digital cash is the most obvious use of that invention. But there are other inventions. When I buy a stock on a stock exchange, I don't own the stock right away. There's this business of settlement and clearing that can take up to 3 days before it's actually even in my name. And at that point, I still don't have it. It's in a brokerage account. What we're going to do is we're going to see a replacement of all of these institutions that are the custodians and the brokers over everything. That's not going to be necessary anymore.
Eric Townsend, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
The FDA is taking steps to ban menthol-flavored cigarettes and all flavored cigars within the next year. The goal is to reduce disease and death from those products. Menthol is the last flavor currently allowed in cigarettes. CDC says more than a third of all cigarettes sold in the U.S. in 2018 were menthol flavored. Studies have also shown that menthol flavoring can help entice people, especially young people, to become regular smokers. It's also thought that menthol cigarettes are more addictive. The CDC says smoking is the leading cause of preventable death in the United States. And the U.S. solar industry now has voluntary guidelines to help eliminate forced labor from the supply chain. The top trade group just unveiled it today. NTD's Patrick Hayden has the details.
The top US solar industry trade group has new guidelines out to identify forced labor in supply chains. Some US lawmakers worry the industry is dependent on raw materials like polysilicon that are linked to work camps in China's Xinjiang region. The State Department has determined that the Chinese Communist Party is carrying out genocide there, and the US banned cotton and tomato imports from the region this year. China, the world's largest maker of solar products, denies all accusations of abuse. The US Solar Energy Industry Association unveiled a 40-page document that outlines measures companies should take. The guide explains how companies can identify where their source materials come from and how to trace them through the supply chain. The guide doesn't mention China specifically. UN experts and rights groups estimate over 1 million people, mainly Uyghurs, have been detained in vast camps in Xinjiang in recent years. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Still to come. You can now rent a whole car from Uber, not just a ride, and you won't have to drive any strangers around, don't worry. And one man's journey to prove that the only thing he needs to do his job is a laptop and an internet connection, taking remote working to the extreme. That in just a moment on NTD News.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her. All sort of handmade things. The artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. Birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
The cruise industry might be able to resume voyages in U.S. waters this July. USA Today says it obtained a letter from the CDC to the industry and got more details from the agency. The CDC says eliminating risk on cruises isn't possible, so the idea is to mitigate it. The agency is also clarifying how cruise companies can meet its requirements in order to sail. And you can now rent an entire car through Uber and put yourself in the driver's seat. The nationwide program is called Uber Rent, and it will offer cars from brands like Avis and Hertz. Rental companies will set the prices, not Uber, but Uber does get a cut of the bookings. You won't have to offer rides to strangers though, don't worry, the rental car is all yours for the donation. And Uber even offers a contactless way to deliver cars given social distancing concerns. The car rental technology, though, isn't new. Uber competitor Lyft has been offering car rentals in its app since 2019. One man is testing just how far from the cubicle he can get. He set up an office dangling off a cliff face over the Irish Sea. NTD's Sapphire Quarter tells us more.
Something most of us will never experience, hanging over the Irish Sea on a tiny man-made cliff. But Jason Griffin's not just here for the view.
And I will be working all day from that ledge and taking and making calls, interacting with internal staff, while I sit there on this ledge on the side of a cliff.
He works with Five9, a company that makes call computer software. He claims that he can do his job anywhere, as long as he's connected to the internet. It's part of a new trend. They're called digital nomads.
The untethered workforce would appear to be the way forward.
There's no handrails here.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine.
Even for the brave of heart, it can be a little daunting.
That's it.
Yeah.
Nice and relaxed.
I'm trying to relax.
It's worth pushing through the discomfort for the serene scene.
A new way of working is going to be completely different going forward. That's how I see it. And it's exciting because it fits people's life so much better.
Not everyone thinks remote working is here to stay. A survey by accountants KPMG this March reveals most large companies aren't planning to reduce their office spaces. On the other hand, Griffin is thinking up another extreme place for his next office. He's considering an uninhabited island off the western coast of Scotland. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
As the latest business updates for today, you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. But for NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.